Welcome to this episode. We will be talking to Dr. Leo Carlson, Chief Sales and Marketing Officer for Norvado in Cable, Wisconsin. As a key member of the executive team, Leo serves as the Chief Sales and Marketing Officer for Norvado in Cable, Wisconsin. Through his career, he has spearheaded the launch of new marketing and quality assurance departments, restructured customer service, and reshaped sales strategy. These changes significantly contributed to the company's recent 120% growth in revenue and a 340% net income upswing. Leo has a Doctor of Business Administration degree in Business Intelligence and Business Analytics, and a Master's of Science in Information Security from Capella University. His Bachelor of Science degree in Information Technologies from Kaplan University. He enjoys being active in the community and has 10 plus years of experience as an adjunct professor of graduate and undergraduate programs. Norvado is the largest independent service provider in the state of Wisconsin by square miles of coverage, not by total customers. Norvado averages 7 subscribers per square mile of fiber. Started in 1950, they have never forgotten their roots and why they do what they do, their neighbors. Norvado began building out its ILEC service territory with fiber in 2019. In 2018, Norvado acquired Price County Telecom. They have since begun replacing all of their copper plant with fiber and plan to finish the project in 2023. They love what they do, and they truly believe that the life is better in the North Woods, and with big internet is best for both worlds. All ILEC subscribers will be fiber to the home by 2023. Approximately 90% are fiber to the home now. The CLEC subscribers are a mixture of fiber to the home and XDSL, with all new subscribers are fiber to the premise. They have no wireless services. They have around 15,000 total subscribers. 12,000 internet subscribers, 7,000 phone subscribers, 3,000 video subscribers, and 2,000 managed service subscribers. They have approximately 2,500 miles of fiber in the Western Exchange, and with very little copper plant left, with the exception of the original CLEC in Haywood. On the Eastern Exchange, the acquisition of Price County Telecom, they have a very in-depth build cycle replacing all the copper in the network with fiber. They are actively building out in several CLEC areas in portions of the state, both commercial and residential, all with fiber. Many of the CLEC projects are funded with grants from the federal government and state PSC grants. Well, good morning, Mr. Dr. Carlson. I appreciate your taking the time to meet with us and talking.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here, David. This is fantastic opportunity. So I'm glad to see you're getting this thing going, and I think there needs to be a lot more telecom discussions, especially as we get into this kind of crazy Wild West kind of time we have going on right now. So this is good.
Most definitely. So as I said, I kind of have some breaker questions to ask with, just so we get our conversation going. And I guess the first question I like to always ask is, so how did you get started into the telecommunications industry in the first place?
So, I think at heart, I'm an IT guy. I started out in the IT industry working for a software company. I was in the Air Force for 7 years as a mechanic, so I like working with my hands. Got out of the Air Force and started working in the IT industry for a software startup out west in Oregon there, and really enjoyed that aspect of it. And I love the IT industry. Got a couple of degrees doing that, working through that, and even worked remotely for a while for that software company, handling their tech support and doing some, traveling around the country doing some installation. So I started out in the IT world and kind of took an IT job here at Norvado and barely knowing anything about telecom. And I've since had the opportunity to spend a lot of time in the CO and the operations world, a lot of time doing, IT services and IT work for the sales team, and doing quite a bit of different things and working in different aspects of telecom, and kind of, working my way up and working my way through some of the different types of things within the telecom industry. So I wouldn't say I decided originally to get into telecom. I got into IT, and there's an awful lot of overlap between telecom and IT, and the further we get into SIP and into a lot of the different technologies, the IT world overlaps even more with the telecom world. And I think it's just a fascinating process. And the mechanics of those networks and the big networks that telecoms have and are developing and are building, and the way the internet comes into play into broadband is absolutely fascinating, and how that all plays together. So I didn't come at it as a telecom guy originally. I came at it as an IT guy, and kind of just as I worked with the industry, I love this industry. I love the way the direction of it. It appeals to a lot of my my hands-on kind of stuff. I love that the mechanics, the original mechanics of how it all worked and how it's morphed and changed and kind of developed. So
Okay.
I don't get to do that much of that kind of stuff anymore. But I still enjoy talking about it and kind of reviewing how it all works. So
That's great. So, because you were more of an IT oriented individual, what made you decide to come to work for Norvado?
well, opportunity really. The company I was working for, the software company, uh, was doing well. Um, Being an IT guy, it's really hard to stay focused on one thing for a long period of time. Working with the software company, I was writing software manuals and doing support and doing a lot of that kind of stuff. But generally, I was working on one piece of software, and you knew that software inside, outside, backwards, forwards. You could support it in your sleep. I think I did that a couple times, but it gets a little bit dull for an IT guy. Probably has a little bit of ADD problem with wanting to have my hands on something new. And so I started going to school while I was doing that, and finishing a degree in IT. And the opportunity came up at Norvado. Was an opportunity to get back to a more rural uh, place where I grew up in northern Minnesota, really rural. um, and it was an opportunity to get there and to raise a family in that kind of an environment. So that's kind of what attracted me to Norvado: the ability to do more IT work, as well as learn a new industry, and bring up a family in a rural environment. So
Okay. Well, I know that Norvado is a rural ILEC, a cooperative, but you also have a CLEC operations. What was some? I mean, as the director of marketing and sales and marketing, no, vice president. Sorry about that. Um, or chief rather. Okay,
mhm.
chief sales and marketing officer. Sorry. Uh, what was the driver to go outside the ILEC region and go into the CLEC?
It began with a commercial sales play. um, Commercial sales is always looking for to expand. um, and for the longest time, commercial sales was kind of an afterthought, and I think it still is for a lot of rural telcos. um, that that sales piece, that commercial sales piece, working directly with the businesses and developing tools and practices and things just for them, um, it's almost an afterthought for a lot of us, and it was for us for the longest time. um, but we started looking at, as we're building fiber into these areas, we were getting phone calls constantly. Can you bring us service? Can you do this? The best we can get here is 10-1 on copper, or 25/3, or even 100, but our upload is ridiculously low and we just can't get it done. We really want some fiber. Can you bring it to us? So we started out with um, looking at where our service territory ended. Where did the ILEC end? Where was our CLEC originally existing? Which for us, it's in our southern part of our exchange, or not even our exchange. Our CLEC is separate. Um, but it was, we started to work with those businesses, and then we started to look at, okay, here's a business that's you know going to be a customer worth several $1,000s a month. can we afford not to get this customer fiber? Can we just let them go? The answer ultimately was no. We need to get this customer on fiber. In our case, it worked out for us. They were about a mile down the road from where we had our fiber, through a town, one of our local areas here, and we put the fiber in the ground. They assisted us with some costs. We cut them a pretty good deal on burying fiber to them, but they did assist us getting that done. And then we started to look at where can we go from here. As we built it, we made sure we worked with our engineering group and got handholds put in and places where we could splice into that fiber and start to get some more businesses off of it. So we looked along that route first, and where are some of the businesses that are close to this, and started working directly with those businesses on a commercial level. So that became our commercial CLEC play, and almost a cherry picking. We're cherry picking what we can get off of our fiber right now, and it worked. We were able to get a lot more fiber out there. The companies that we were working with, the commercial entities have a little bit more money to play with than the residential. So there was that, and we could, they were willing to put a little bit of money in to get some fiber to them to make their businesses run better. And it was an investment for them. It was an investment for us. And it just really worked out for us to get that. And that's where our CLEC kind of started. We had CLEC in the copper days. Everybody started a CLEC at some form or another back a long time ago. But this was our first real foray into CLEC and on a pure fiber play. So it worked out really well for us. Now we're kind of morphing that into expansion and project size based on, okay, here's an area of this town. We're going to build this year, and we're going to push it out. And those were funding out of pocket. So, we want to make sure that we have an ROI plan, and we have the whole how we're going to get customers in the area. Whereas the original plan was, let's work with the business to make sure that it has an actual, we have a couple year payback, 3 to 5 years, we're going to pay this back. Whereas now we're kind of, okay, we're going to build this and we're going to expand these areas bigger. And that's where our residential does come in. In the more populated areas, we can do that. Less populated, less dense areas of CLEC play, we're working with grants and a few other different funding mechanisms. But
okay, it's always interesting to see, because the rural elects are very conservative in the way that they expand and things of this nature, and a lot of times there's just not a business environment in the rural elect areas to justify it.
That's the hardest part. I think that's the argument that the most difficult part for, sometimes the most difficult part of my job is going to our CEO and our board of directors and saying, hey, we have an opportunity here. And in the world of telcos and broadband, we're still pretty small. At about 15,000 subscribers, we're pretty small. And so we are very, very conscious of the bottom dollar, and being a cooperative, we need to make sure that we're taking care of those customers right there first. And we've been fortunate to have a great board of directors, a great CEO that can start to look at some of these opportunities and see some of these opportunities outside. So.
Okay, great. So, because you are in the northeastern portion or northwestern portion of Wisconsin, so it's rural marketplace. What do you see some of the greatest challenges in the rural marketplace for telecom?
We have some new challenges right now. Today we're seeing unprecedented financial opportunities coming to us as a rural provider. We've never seen the government or the states throw this kind of money at us to be able to do what we need to do to get fiber and get broadband to people. But it's still, I think it's overlooked that once that fiber is in the ground, once it's there, there's still a cost to run it. And when we're roughly 7 people per square mile is on average. the costs are significant, and especially if you want to add new people or new customers to that and to build that up. So that's where I do think the challenges, the USF challenges, present an interesting challenge for us. We want to make sure that we're still receiving some kind of funding to be able to maintain this system once we get it in the ground, once we build it. Being as rural as we are, building it, maintaining it. Anytime somebody, the farmer happens to cut our fiber because he was plowing in the wrong spot, or somebody happens to be putting in a new house and puts a new culvert in and accidentally cuts our fiber out there, we have to have ways and means to be able to fix that. And at even $79 a month, or give or take on average, that a residential customer pays, it doesn't take more than one big fiber cut to end up with being backwards on your monthlies. So that's a big challenge for us. The other one I think that we're going to see, and that we have been seeing for the past several years, is going to be a manpower shortage. We're struggling to find people, just to be able to get people to come and work, just like everybody else. I mean, this industry is not that different when it comes to that stuff, but that's going to be our biggest struggle. I mean, right now, the money coming at us is phenomenal. We have we're planning fiber build projects out about 2024 now, I think, is where we're planning. And financially it's going to be okay, but finding the people to do the work, getting the fiber to do the long lead times on fiber, and other issues, those are probably going to be the biggest challenges we see. And like I said before, we're pretty small, so when you have everybody trying to do all these kinds of projects, because that's really where we're at right now, it is going to be a competitive market. And I think we're going to see pay for these installers and the guys in the field going way up, and competition to get them and keep them going up. And yeah, it's a fascinating time to be a part of the industry, for sure.
Yep. So, you mentioned the supply chain. Of course, that's a lot of discussion that's going on right now. Do you, and you said you was forecasting out to 2024 already. Do you see the cost escalation that's happening, putting possibly some of these build programs in jeopardy? Because I mean, the federal government asks you to put your budget together, and then they don't really allow you to adjust it too much after the fact. And so what are you forecasting on that front?
Well, I mean, we actually saw some of that earlier this year. We saw fiber costs and prices increase by almost 20%. So we do expect some of that. And I think some of that is on us to make sure that we're looking ahead as far as we can, and making sure that when we're planning for the build, we're building some of that in. The other part is to try and make sure that we're keeping, well, for one thing, not biting off more than we can chew. We got to make sure that we're not trying to take on more than we can possibly get done in a set period of time. But we also got to make sure that we're keeping a bit back on the, funding wise, to make sure that we can cover these increased costs, and the projected costs. 2024, I mean, you're well aware, David, from your background, that you can prognosticate out as far as you want, but the reality of it is, anything more than a few months and you're really starting to see the crystal ball gets pretty murky when you're 3 or 4 years out. So the best laid plans, it doesn't come back. We got to be able to be flexible a little bit, and to do that, we have to keep some cash on hand. So we're constantly making sure we have this much dollar value available to work with if we can, and it's a balancing act, for sure.
Most definitely. So, we were going through and still yet living through the COVID period and everything. What type of actions did, Norvado take to address the COVID aspects, and what do you believe the impact was from both a customer perspective and an operational perspective?
So we actually took a very kind of a different approach than some of our peers here in the state. we set up a very strict policy, and made sure that our customer service folks were asking questions. We had a set of questions to ask the customer before we were going to allow an installer in their home. We gave the installer a lot of leeway to be able to say, I'm not going to, I'm not comfortable here. I'm going to, do this. I'm going to step away. We made sure that the customers were wearing masks. We put a mask stipulation on making sure our customers had a mask on when they were in the same room, keep a 6-foot distance. For the most part, we're still doing some of those things. We've relaxed some of that a little bit. But we're the first job, at least at the leadership level, is to make sure that our employees are staying safe. And those guys out in the field, they have a huge job and an important job, and they're in contact with those customers on a daily basis. So they've taken steps to make sure everything is maintained and cleaned and on their end, as well as making sure that they're following all their protocols, and we're making sure that we do everything we can to keep them safe on our end. And so far it's worked pretty well. And we give them a lot of that ability just to say, hey, I'm not okay today, I'm not feeling well today, I'm not going to go in, and we'll flex those appointments around them. But as far as demand for services, as far as how that's gone, it's been unprecedented. I think we added 1,000 new subscribers to various different services that we have. I think almost at least half of them were actual new customers that had never had service with us before. In 2020, and in 2021 we duplicated that almost to a T. So it was fascinating to see. I mean, yeah, people were home a lot more and they needed a lot more services, but they were increasing services too. So it wasn't that they just needed, I need a phone, or I need internet, or I need TV. It's, what else can you do for me, and what other options do you have? And so we saw a lot of that being handled, and we were able to do. We've changed some of our practices to be a lot more remote, where we can handle a lot of those things remotely. But it's been an amazing increase for us to see that, just the numbers coming in and going fast. So
Right. So actually, that's a great segue into my next question is so what type of services do you all offer, and what have you seen as far as increase in demand for
Sure.
services?
So we offer voice, video, and internet. So we have broadband on our all on fiber. We've seen the increase in nearly every area, including phone service, which was a pretty big shock to us. We've been, year over year, we're seeing that phone service decline. But for the past couple of years now, we've seen a little bit of an uptick in people taking that phone service again and starting to utilize it. I think some of it's cost. We're driving the costs way down on the phone, and including it in a lot of packages. But we're also monitoring, as far as how much people are using these things, and we're seeing an uptick in that, even on that physical phone line, that people are still they still like that physical contact, especially during those quarantine times when they needed to get a hold of somebody. The reliability of that landline phone was nice for people to have, especially in this rural area. So we've seen a definite uptick in it. We also self-hosted VoIP services on our SmartLink PBX product to businesses. We've seen a huge uptake in that as well. And we're getting into the IT as a service and some different as a service model type tools. But we've seen an uptick in just about everything. Some of that's because of the numbers of projects we have in the works with, adding more CLEC areas and more residential for CLEC and business. But yeah, it's been fascinating to see the uptick and the speed and the growth, both of Norvado and just of our people in our service territory. As far as why, I think a lot of it had to do with being kind of stuck with COVID, and this whole move towards a remote environment. Bayfield County, for the last several years, even before COVID, Bayfield County and their economic development group was working towards presenting the county as a remote place to work, where people should come here and work remotely. And it's been working. I mean, we've seen an uptick uh, in home sales. I mean, we've seen an uptick in even tourism and the ability to be here, somewhat because Norvado has a big fiber network in place in Bayfield County. And then we've seen people come to stay. So that increase in traffic has brought people to the area and has really been a great boon to the area. I think I'd have to check the numbers, but I think Bayfield County was within the top 5 of counties that had expanded and grown even in the last couple of years, as opposed to staying the same or shrinking. So fascinating numbers when it comes to some of that. And a lot of it is attributed to broadband and the availability of broadband in our communities. So
what do you think is the demographic mix that you all have up there?
You know, we have an aging demographic, and we have for a long time. A lot of elderly, a lot of in this area, but that's we're starting to see some of that change a little bit with the availability of remote work, with the big network that we have, and the availability of doing that. We're starting to see that tip a little bit. Still considered to be an aging demographic, still considered to be, especially in the rural areas, relatively poor. But it's, I think more and more people are seeing that they can work in a remote area. They can work in, say Cable, Wisconsin, or one of our small towns, or even in the middle of nowhere. I mean, we have customers that are a mile down the end of the road. There's no neighbors anywhere in the middle of the national forest that have big fiber right to their house. And people are able to have bandwidth and have the ability to work on almost any project they can think of for any company they want anywhere in the world. And we've set up systems and video conferencing and different ways of doing things remotely for customers for years, a lot more in the last couple of years, but we've set them up for people working in Alaska as teachers in Alaska. And I mean, just all over the country. It's been fascinating to see how, where that's going and where it's growing.
That's great. In fact, I know that is one of the biggest challenges we face in the rural marketplace is that the aging demographic and everything. So it's always nice to see, and I've seen that even here in Arkansas, where the demographic has started to change, and more of the younger demographics coming here and buying some land and building, or buying houses that are existing, things of nature. So that's always great to see that happen.
It's fascinating. It's great to see, and it's a great influx into our communities. The economic development ramifications of that. Just the businesses get to be thriving, and they get to see a different type of customer. It's worked out great.
Yep. So who do you see as competition in your area? I mean, there's lots of people, but rural marketplaces have a much different competition market.
Sure. And we get the argument from customers and other people all the time that we're a monopoly. And to a small degree, they're right. There isn't any other competition here. However, it's not a monopoly that says you can't come here. We welcome anybody to bring their fiber and bury it right alongside ours if they want to spend that kind of money to do it. But that really is the problem with most rural markets, is there just isn't anybody else that wants to do it. As you mentioned before, the cost of doing that is ridiculously high. And the cost of acquiring a customer when you got to bury a mile of fiber to get there, and you have about 100-year payback before you can actually see profit on that customer, makes it really difficult to serve the rural markets. But as we become less rural, as we see RDOF and different funding mechanisms start to come out, and we start to see some of these more competition, the expectation is that we're going to see a lot more from Lumen as they start to take a look at options, more specifically in the towns. I don't anticipate a lot of a lot of them wanting to do the rural side. It's just, like I said, the cost of acquisition is too high. Unless you can get the funding to do the fiber, to get the fiber put in, the cost is really high to do it. But in the towns, we have Charter, we have CenturyLink, our two primary ones that we see. We've talked to LTD, who won a lot of our area up here as in the RDOF stuff. So we've had a couple of discussions with them. Kind of wondering how they're going to handle that, and we'll see as time progresses. But Charter's another one that's starting to see a little bit more into that rural area, because fiber makes it, the distance you can travel over fiber versus copper makes some things in the rural area a little bit better. So we definitely do have some competition. Starlink is definitely going to be a player, especially here when we get into some of these territories where people want to build a house, right? And as far out as they can, and I love that. But it does make it difficult, and Starlink might make it more sense for them in some cases. And we're seeing that in northern parts of Minnesota, Michigan, different areas like that. So Starlink's going to be an interesting player if they can get some of their technical issues worked out, some of their pieces. We do have a couple of our people that are using it that don't happen to live inside of our service territory. Got to keep tabs and make sure we know what's going on. So, but they're doing it successfully. They're using the satellite successfully, and so we definitely are going to see. Personally, I feel that competition is coming. Whether as a rural telco, we haven't seen a lot of it yet, but we're going to. These next few years, we're going to see more competition than we've ever seen before. And if you're a rural telco and you're not getting ready for competition, you're asleep at the wheel, because it's coming, and it's coming fast. And that would be my biggest message for my peers and for others out there in the rural industry is, you got to be ready for this, because it is the Wild West out here, and there's going to be companies coming out of the woodwork. The Wisps are doing some amazing things with speed wise, and most of us who are fiber, they're Wisp, but if we're not careful, those will come back to bite us. There's municipal networks, there's all kinds of things that are going to pop up that are going to be competitors for our customers. And if we're not looking at that from a sales and marketing standpoint, we're not looking at that from a network standpoint, how can we compete with these other companies, especially the ones with big deep pockets like a Starlink or a Charter or a Lumen even. We got to be aware of it, because it's coming.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I always have said that the rural market is underserved and underestimated.
Absolutely.
Because I've built networks around the world and things of this nature, and it's always fun whenever you sit there and say, okay, you had this assumption, and I'm going to prove you wrong. And that is, I mean, that was the whole CLEC model in the first place.
Yep.
And the broadband services model is definitely doing that. I mean, and it's following the same models we had back when CLEC, put in wireless, then go hardline, and so it's just an ongoing process.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean,
it is.
That's what makes telecommunication industry so much fun, is because all those things that all those rules that you assumed are always changing.
Right.
So you've mentioned it a few times, and I'd like to just kind of get your thoughts on these state and governmental funds that are coming out there. I mean, the biggest problem I see with a lot of them is that there's a lot of rules that makes it difficult to use it. Then there was the RDOF, which kind of got abused. I'll just put it that way, and everything. But so how are you all seeing these funds, and you mentioned earlier about a massive amount of funds coming, but with the rule sets that apply to them, how are you all working with that?
It's a great question, because we're used to the states. We're used to Wisconsin. We're used to what we've seen there. Um, but when it comes to some of these other federal grants, we're not as used to dealing. I mean, for the last several years, we've dealt more with the FCC than we have with the NTIA. That seems to be moving. It seems to be a moving target now that now NTIA is taking over a lot of the funding mechanisms. And I think that's good. But you're right. The rules are different, and trying to make sure that we can get funding, make sure that we're, maintaining the number of employees, maintaining the cost of service, keeping the cost of service lower. There's rules. They're putting new rules in every different grant cycle, and we've been seeing it in the states as well. So once we get it figured out, they change the rules on us, and we got to figure it out again. So it never seems to be. It always seems to be a changing, constantly changing and moving, and um, it would be nice to have a set of rules, but I guess the hardest part is one grant sees your speed of 25/3 as the threshold that you need to exceed, and if you're underserved if or unserved if you're 25/3, whereas another grant says, well, you're underserved if you're below 100, and it's like, okay, we need that. It'd be nice to see some of this that said, okay, this is our standard, we're going to keep it. But it's a lot of research. You can't imagine the amount of time and money we put into going through RDOF and really reviewing the process. And you're right, that was a fiasco as far as we were concerned. It didn't. There was a lot that could have been different. But we do a lot of the same things with each grant cycle that comes out. We go over. We have our entire leadership team starts going over the different aspects and different areas of the grants. A lot of times we have to bring in consultants and cost consultants to say, okay, does this make sense? Where does this go? I mean, can we do this? Can we afford to do this? If there's a lien against something on the piece, because that's been being added lately, where they want to have a lien against the service or against the fiber in the ground, and it's like, well, how is that going to work? If so there's a lot of questions as soon as they start putting something new in, and we have to review every single grant as new. There's a new rule every single time it comes around. So
Yep. And that's one of the things that whenever the government talks about all this money they're releasing and things of this nature, they don't really tell the individual consumer that, okay, yeah, there are $40 billion available. However, it's going to cost the company to even think about using it $100,000, and
exactly. Yeah.
that money's not recoverable normally, and so all of a sudden, you're going, all the people going, well, but the government's giving you all this money. You're going, no, it's not being given, and no, it's not free.
That's exactly right. There's no such thing as free lunch. I mean, we've all heard that statement, and it's true. I mean, yes, they're going to give us money to do some of this stuff, but there's a significant cost to it, to developing that and to going through that process. And you got to talk to the legal side, and you got to talk to the cost consultants, and you got to make sure that this is not going to it's not going to ruin some kind of a NECA piece that you're working on the background, and it's not going to cause you all kinds of issues. It's yeah, there's a lot of hoops we have to jump through. In the end, hopefully we'll be better for it, but I think we will. There's a lot of money out there. It's worth doing it. It's just there's a lot to do.
Yeah. And sometimes, there's so many grant potentials or loan potentials that you don't have the time to look at all of them. So
Right.
then you have to decide which one you're going to go for and which one you're not. And then, of course, they say, oh, this is a grant, but it's a 25% U fund and 75%, like the Reconnects for, and things of this nature. So there's a lot of hidden things that seems like it's obvious, but it's not, everything and all. So in the concept of what Norvado's been doing, what type of grants have you all gone for and been successful with?
So we've been very successful with the PSC grants at the state level. We've done an awful lot year over year with that since since the state started doing it, I think back in 2015. Um, Now, the amounts that we have available have been jumping exponentially, but we've been very successful at getting a little piece of it here and there, um, at the PSC level, at the state level, and then we were very successful with the ARPA grants. I think we received 5 out of 5 in our last grant cycle with ARPA, and we're waiting to hear from NTIA as far as an NTIA grant that we applied for some territory in our southern part of our exchanges, or south of our normal exchanges. So and that's the very large, that we're asking for a very large amount of money there to cover a very rural type areas. So I mean, I think they're about 4 people per square mile in that ask. So it's pretty rural. And it's, so the NTIA is the last one we've done. I mean, we've done RUS loans in the past, to get some of this process started. And we were the recipient of a very large stimulus chunk back in 2009. So that helped to jumpstart our process to get fiber in the ground. But as far as grants and loans that we're seeing today, those are the ones that we've been seeing and have. And there's another round that just opened up for us here in Wisconsin that we're jumping into again. So at least right now, it seems like every 2 or 3 months we're back in the boardroom trying to figure out what type of, what's going to work for us as far as this cycle. How can we fit it in, and how can we fund it, other than there's always some component of our own dollars that have to go into it. um and how fast can we get it done? We don't want to, if there's another company out there that can do it way faster than us, we don't necessarily want to be the only company that's trying to get this done. If somebody else can get it done in a year and it's going to take us 3, we'd rather see that. In some cases, I mean, if it's dead center in the middle of our territory, we're probably going to argue about that a little bit. But for the most part, when we're starting to branch out, we're looking at those options, and we want to be the best neighbor that we can for our customers. We want to take as good a care of them as we possibly can, making sure that they have the best possible bandwidth and the most availability and a good price. So that's what we're always looking for.
Great. Now, you did mention, one thing that I think that every rural elect is looking at closely, and that is the USF funds and how that's changing, because, used to be tied to voice access lines and things of that nature. And that is an ongoing challenge because, rural elects really count on that.
Really do. Yeah.
And I don't think people understand that, to build that mile down their driveway, there is funding, but it doesn't come for a couple years and things of this nature. So it's a interesting challenge. And as the rules change, and which they all talk about lots of changes to it, it's
For
something
sure.
that we are very concerned about. Okay, so now to kind of close up our conversation, I'd just like to ask a few more generic type questions. And that is, one, you entered into the telecommunications world out from the IT. Do you believe that the telecom world is a good industry for people to work in? And if so, why or why not?
Oh, I absolutely. I mean, this industry has been really good to me, and the people involved in it, the people you get to meet, like yourself, David, and at the different conventions. NTCA is a great organization as far as getting things going and working with their customers. Um, all those rural ILECs that are out there with NTCA, and it's even fascinating now to see the electric cooperatives getting into the broadband industry. So for one thing, there's a ton of opportunity. So if I was if I was 30 years younger and just starting out, I would definitely be looking at something like this as far as opportunity. There's going to be opportunity for growth. Companies like Norvado have grown in the past 5 years. I think I wouldn't say we've doubled in size, but it's getting close. And we're, like I said, we're still pretty small. There's other companies out there that are growing very similar to us and expanding and trying to build out their networks in their areas for their customers. yeah, it's a great industry. There's so many different aspects of it. The IT and the technology and the network is one aspect. Of the construction side is another. Um, you know, splicing, getting those fiber splicers out there, and um, it is a great industry, and the people in it are awesome. And I've worked in a couple of different industries, and the telecom folks are just, they're a great group of people to work with. They're for the most part, they're very forward thinking. They're very trying to figure out how we can do this, how we can do it better, how we can, uh, very innovative. There's a lot of innovation that's happening as far as, can we get this done with what we have, the tools we have? How can we do it better? So I mean, there's several different places. That IT piece, getting in at the IT level, like I did, coming in on the construction crews, working through the construction, the outside plant groups, and working in the central office with massive computer networks and different aspects there. Um, Including coming in on the sales and marketing side. I think that's a piece that's, like I said before, I think that's very overlooked by many of our rural telcos. And I think that's going to change in the next few years. I think that's going to be something that we have to look at changing. Um, we have to have marketing people that understand the industry, that understand how to communicate the message, because not everybody does understand the industry, especially the consumers. And as we change from original TV platforms to a streaming, and that has to be some education pieces that's going to require some marketing talent to get that out there. So I mean, there's so many different spaces and so many different ways to enter the industry now. It is definitely a great place to start. And the other piece that I've been seeing a lot now is a crossover. I mean, there's a lot of people coming from, the electric industry, or I mean, even the plumbing and different fields like that, different trades that can cross over and start to uh, working with us, as far as when it comes to wiring a new house or a new building, we can come in and get that done first, or they can do it and we can get some crossover there, and we get to hire some of those guys. They get hired some of ours away. So I mean, I think that's an important piece too, is to note that, uh, you know if you get into it from a different trade, that happens too. So I mean, yeah, it's definitely a great place to start, and it's definitely a fantastic industry to grow in. So
Yeah. I've been blessed. I've been in the telecom industry for 43 years now, and a couple times I stepped my foot out and ran right back as quick as I could and everything. But it's been definitely good to me, and I've enjoyed it. And I always like to have the young ones, learn what it is that it's all about. Because, I mean, I go back to cross switches, so you know, uh, so I've definitely seen the evolution and the changes in technology, as you mentioned, and it's been very much of a pleasurable environment. Everyone kind of thinks the telecom is kind of that, stuck in the mud phone, but there's so much things behind it that people don't understand.
that's right. It you know it's a little complicated to make a phone call from, say, Arkansas. Well, even now it's Arkansas, we're on a video conference call, but say a phone call to France or someplace else, all of that, even back 30 years ago, was a complicated piece of equipment to get that done. And
Yeah.
it's fascinating to see the changes and how SIP has revolutionized how we're doing different things, how different um, software defined networks are building this whole, yeah, we're
Yeah.
we're we're building something pretty fascinating, and I'm curious to see how it goes. So
Oh yeah. Yeah. I always used to get amused because, in fact, my family would ask me, so what do you do for a job, David? And I'm going, I design and build telephone networks. And they're going, huh? No comprehension of what that meant.
no, they still remember that. They still think about the lady sitting at the switch and plugging and
Yep.
unplugging, and that's
Yeah. Good old Lily Tomlin.
right. Exactly.
Yep. Okay. So just to kind of close up our conversation, so did this interview align with what you was expecting and hoping to see?
Yeah, absolutely. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and it's um, this. I think there needs to be more of this within our industry, and I think the timing is good for it. I hope it works. I hope this is something that you can keep doing for a long time, because I do think that uh, we need to talk more about this stuff, and the industry needs to come together a little bit, uh, and just communicate some of these things and how it's going. So yeah, it definitely lined up with what I was expecting. It's always great to talk to you, David. I think I've met you a couple different times at different shows and different events, but you know, it's this kind of stuff is fun for me. This is always fun, I think, to get a chance to talk about what we do and share a little bit of what Norvado is doing. Like I said, we're pretty small. We're in the middle of nowhere in Wisconsin, and nobody hears too much. But I think like everybody else, we're busy. We're doing a lot, and I think that people want to keep their ear to the ground. They're going to hear a little more of Norvado in the coming months, so it'll be kind of fascinating to see.
That'll be great. Last question is, so for future podcasts, do you have any recommendations on topics?
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about, some of the, what other companies are doing, what other rural telcos are doing on as far as sales and marketing goes. How are they kind of pulling that together, and where's it going? I mean, the unfortunate thing is there's so many very, very small rural telcos that marketing is not top of mind. And that's going to be a struggle going forward. So, I mean, there's going to be options and there's going to be ways of doing it, but I would love to hear more about how others, even the mid-sized or, small to medium-sized companies like Norvado, how are they putting their word out there? What are some of their marketing tactics to get some of those things out there? As well as discussing how competition shapes up. How are we handling competition in our areas? I think that's a topic that none of us, especially in the rural markets, like to talk about. As far as it's coming. As much as we hate it, it's coming. You and I talked about it a little bit earlier. It's gonna hit us right between the eyes at some point, and we're gonna walk out one day and realize that billboard wasn't there yesterday. And it may not be quite that obvious, but there's so much happening in the industry today, and within these next 5 years, it's going to run over us if we're not careful.
Yeah. And one of the challenges that a rural market has, or rural X have, is that you can't really compete on price points. So if an MSO moves in and they go and they jack the prices way down, you can't really do that because you still have operating costs that they share across, multiple thousands of subscribers.
Right. Our little 15,000 subscribers holds nothing to an AT&T with multiple millions.
Yeah.
The operating expenses that we incur during a day is about 15 minutes worth for them. So, right. I mean, our whole year's worth of operating is about 15 minutes for them. So, I mean, it is true. The small rural ILECs and the rural LECs in the areas, they're a great group of people. They're the first people I would recommend going to if you're a community looking to build a network. Because most of us in the rural markets, we want to help our neighbors. Even if our neighbors are 300 miles away, we want to help you out. So sometimes we can't, but we can at least tell you what even if we don't have a dog in that fight, we can at least give you some advice on how to get it going, how to, there's an awful lot of pitfalls out there for somebody just starting out, for companies and, municipalities just starting out. Talk to those rural providers, and we might be able to help out with some of those angles.
Yep. So. Yeah, a lot of the communities, because that's where a lot of government funds is going toward those community networks and stuff of this nature. And so many of them say, well, we're going to build a head in, and they're going, oh, wait a moment, that was back in the 90s. But just assumptions that they think that is the right choice, and it's not always.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of it is just communicate. And
right.
There's a lot, there's so many different points of view on how to get something done. And that's the part of the beauty of the industry is, like everything, there's not just one magic bullet to make it work. What we do as a cooperative isn't the same as what a municipality will do. It's not the same as what somebody else that's coming in might be able to do. So there's so many different ways of looking at it. And nobody's 100% perfect. So you're always going to find, the best way to approach that is to get as many different ideas as you can. Start to weigh your options. And my recommendation would be to talk to somebody that's not got any money in the pot for that. That's not going to be making money off of it. Because most likely the rural provider that's 100 miles down the road, they probably can't get you services, but they'd be more than happy to let you know what it costs and how it works and what, come take a tour of our area and see what we do every day. So usually the rural providers are very accommodating when it comes to that. And if we can provide services, we're going to find a way to do it as well.
Sure. Yep. Okay. Well, I want to say, Dr. Carlson, thank you very much for your time. And I hope that I'll be able to have you on some future video calls and maybe a panel conversation about sales and marketing in the rural marketplace.
That would be great, David. I've really appreciated this. I've enjoyed it very much. Always a pleasure to talk to you and, see your posts and LinkedIn and what you're doing here. And so, I really appreciate you going about and doing this and kicking something like this off for our industry.
It's my pleasure because, like I said, 43 years has done me a lot of good, and I got to pay back somehow or another.
Right.
Okay.
All
So,
right.
well, have a good day. And I think, again, thank you for your time.
Absolutely. Take care.
Bye-bye.